But first up is the impeachment sham, the impeachment coup, the impeachment abuse of the President of the United States, our Constitution, our constitutional republic, and you, American citizen. We've been seeing it going on now. It's, I think, day 9 or 10 of outrageous defamation and smearing of the President of the United States by the House impeachment managers, an able defense by the President's attorneys. And I tell you, what's been refreshing about the impeachment trial, now, generally speaking, there should never have been an impeachment trial, and I'll get to that, is that the impeachment gang, the coup-cabal, ran into a buzzsaw. And the buzzsaw is the rule of law as presented by the due process rights, or as presented by the attorneys who are finally able to vindicate a little bit of the President's due process rights. Remember, he's had 0 due process to date. That House impeachment proceeding was one of the worst abuses by the House of Representatives of any American citizen in American history. And I don't say that lightly. Witness after witness came in. The President had no ability to cross-examine, practically speaking. He was denied all due process rights as we understand it under American law. And yet they went in and they got that Senate trial despite the abuse of the President, despite the concerns about the corrupt relationship between Adam Schiff and the leaker, the one that initiated, remember, the whistleblower complaint? That really wasn't a whistleblower complaint. Despite the Schiff abusing the due process rights of the President, despite Schiff, for instance, illicitly getting and then publishing private phone records of the President's lawyers, a congressman, and a journalist. So in my view, that was enough to just throw the whole mess out. The Senate should never have agreed to it, just based on prosecutorial misconduct as it is. And one of the arguments the President's lawyers made as they were in the trial was that this is an impeachment about nothing. They're deficient. So we can just dispense with them quickly. And thankfully, a majority of the senators are seemingly agreeing to that, in the sense that they're not going to allow additional witnesses to be called. They're not going to give Adam Schiff the further benefit of his corruption. And they're going to shut it down forthwith. Now, it's never forthwith enough for me, or probably for you, who have had to suffer through this abusive process. I was on Tucker Carlson last night. I made the point that the President probably would have gotten more due process from Judge Wapner's People's Court than he's gotten from the impeachment abuse he's been suffering through over the last several months. And I tell you what, if they were going to bring in witnesses, for instance, Jay Sekulow made the point. He says not only does the President want his own witnesses, but they've used witnesses that he was unable to cross-examine. So all those 17 witnesses, he should have been able to cross-examine. But, you know, as I've pointed out before, when you go into a court with a lack of evidence about wrongdoing, courts shut you down. They don't allow you to torture your opponent in court if you have no evidence they did anything wrong, no evidence for the case to proceed. Courts shut it down all the time. And in this case, this trial is going to be shortened a bit. It's frankly gone on too long as it is. We don't know exactly when it's going to end. As we're talking now, the Senate is deciding how to basically bring the trial in for landing, because there are going to be no additional witnesses, barring some unforeseen event. And certainly there's no votes to remove the President from office. But just think about the logic. We have no evidence of wrongdoing, no evidence of a crime, no evidence of a near crime, in the words of Adam Schiff, more or less. And so that's a reason just to bring in more witnesses who will provide more information about rumors and presumptions and innuendo. And sure enough, as the trial is proceeding, there's a more abuse of the president, more abuse of the rule of law. You have this leak of the Bolton manuscript. Well, of course, the manuscript, I don't even know if you could call it a leak of the manuscript, because the New York Times, which broke the story, essentially says, well, someone who looked at the manuscript says this is what it says. And it doesn't implicate the president in any wrongdoing. So it's more evidence of nothing. To be clear, no crimes, no evidence. And I want to take a step back and put this in context. And the president's lawyers have raised these issues as well. I don't know, how do you think the lawyers did? You know, provide your view of what happened in our comments, however you're watching this. It goes back to before the presidency, where you had the Obama and Clinton gang colluding with the Russians and the Ukrainians to try to take him out as a candidate. And then once he ran or won, they continued the collusion to try to undermine him as president and try to remove him from office. Part of that was the Mueller special counsel harassment, which again was an investigation over nothing, illegal spying on the President of the United States, illegal spying on the candidate for the president. And then there's this gussied up classified leak, which is the contents of the phone call, which was classified, was leaked through a whistleblower complaint, in my view, improperly in violation of the law. Indeed, it's not a whistleblower complaint that's led to this impeachment canard. And all throughout this process, we've had evidence of criminal activity targeting the President of the United States. The president is a crime victim. He's had his civil rights violated. Other Americans caught up in his orbit have had their rights violated. We had the news last week that the Justice Department has disavowed 2 spy warrants targeting Carter Page, or more specifically the President of the United States, thereby confirming there were crimes committed in spying on him. They had no lawful predicate to spy on Page and Trump indirectly. And what's happening? He's on trial. We've demonstrated through our FOIA lawsuits and litigation, because of course Judicial Watch has been doing the heavy lifting on this. Congress has been ignoring this corruption more or less. There have been individual members. The Senate hasn't done a darn thing on it. Showing that the Obama State Department was colluding with the Clinton gang, Russians, Christopher Steele, Democrats in the House and the Senate to try to destroy Donald Trump. And we're supposed to take at face value the interagency consensus, mostly in the State Department, that the President of the United States did something wrong in asking questions about corruption in Ukraine. What I like about this trial, it shows the president, ironically, despite the best efforts of the coup-cabal to the contrary, is a corruption fighter. He knew something was up in Ukraine, and he pushed, despite the screams from the bureaucrats who were supposed to report to him and implement his directions. He wanted answers on this. The Ukrainians were working with the Clinton campaign, the DNC. They were leaking information. They were directly attacking him. The whole Ukraine issue was the fulcrum on which the Mueller operation rested in terms of trying to get Trump. Manafort is in jail because of Ukraine. We had the Associated Press leaking or going to the Justice Department to try to get Manafort prosecuted based on Ukraine. So you had the reporters trying to put Trump people in jail. That's how crazed this city is Reporters are trying to put all the president's men in jail directly. We have the documents. I tell you what, I'd be happy to testify to the Senate about what we found. Maybe you can call your senators and tell them about what we found and ask them, are they going to follow up? It's good they're going to acquit President Trump, but they need to follow up and get some accountability for the corruption that this abuse of the Senate was designed to cover up. Lisa Murkowski did the right thing in refusing to play games here by providing witnesses, additional witnesses. But of course, you know, we can't rest. You want to know why I'm so agitated? Well, I'm somewhat agitated because I'm kind of hungry right now, but generally I'm agitated because I know this is not going to be over with the acquittal of the President of the United States. You already see the left pursue their Alice in Wonderland logic, verdict first, evidence never. A trial isn't a trial unless we get the witnesses we want. Oh, yes, you can get witnesses, but as long as they're the witnesses we wanted to call, so we get our witnesses and you get our witnesses. And if the president's acquitted in a trial that we disagree with in terms of witness decisions, it's not really a trial, so he's not really acquitted. And they're going to go back to the drawing board. They're going to go back to the impeachment box and the presidential harassment box and continue it. And how is that? And what needs to be done to stop that? There needs to be accountability. Because the goal of doing this is to freeze the Justice Department, freeze the President of the United States. What better way to prevent those who spied on him illegally from being criminally prosecuted than by trying to freeze the head of government, indeed remove the head of government that might prosecute the gang that's trying to remove him from office? We're just about to enter the primary season for presidential campaign. The constitutional absurdity of having at least, 3 senators sit in judgment on this political trial. 3 senators who are trying to beat this president in a presidential candidate are days before their primary contest thinking about to vote as to whether to remove him. So I'm happy the president's going to win, but we're all going to lose in the end, in the sense that our Constitution has been assaulted and damaged. The left now has a new tool that it will use repeatedly and often against presidents they don't like, which is presidents they don't elect. Impeachment. It's going to happen all the time. I know Republicans say that Democrat presidents will have to worry about it now. I doubt it. Because at least under current Republican leadership, and I would counsel against impeaching and removing a president based on nothing. So no, it's not going to happen all the time to leftist presidents, because that's not the way conservatives operate. We try to follow the rule of law. But I want to get back to that point about the rule of law. I was saying what was refreshing about the trial, it shows you why the left hates the rule of law, doesn't it? I mean, I realize it was not a perfect trial in a sense. It's not, the Senate. I went up there to the Senate trial. I was able to get a ticket this week, and I went up there the other day to watch it in person. And it was interesting to see in person, and I'll tell you a little bit about it because I think it would be interesting. I think you'd be interested in this, because the media doesn't really tell you what goes on in the room there. It's a smaller room, as you might imagine, than you might think on TV. And imagine a court proceeding, more or less. All the senators are sitting there, so that's interesting to see. But it's a court proceeding with 125 plus people milling around and being active. So it's a busy court proceeding. Many senators are paying attention, many are not, but just think, you're sitting there for 2 hours at a stretch, more or less, watching testimony. or watching, well, it's not partly testimony, but watching these proceedings. So sometimes they're paying attention, other times they're doing other things, and then other times they're leaving the room. So it's interesting to see. The Chief Justice of the United States is presiding over it. But the outrageous aspect of it is that it looks like the whole Senate's being held hostage by Adam Schiff. That's the impression I had. I mean, I was sitting there for several hours watching it, and I finally had to get up because I couldn't take it anymore. You know what drove me out? When Adam Schiff got up there and said that anyone who wants to question the whistleblower, who I don't think is a whistleblower, he's not legally a whistleblower, he's not morally a whistleblower. And if you want to question this whistleblower, if you want to raise questions about his and his staff's contacts with the whistleblower, your only purpose at this point would be to endanger his life. What an outrageous smear. And if we were in a courtroom, the judge would slap him back. So I was tired of the abuse of the process. I was tired of the abuse of the Senate, and I got up and left. But I was there for you on behalf of Judicial Watch, and it was interesting to see, and I hope that if you come to Washington, you are able to go and watch Senate proceedings and House proceedings now and again, because they do work for you. That's one thing that we have to remember. They work for us. And so I appreciate your continued calls over the last several weeks to the Senate about this trial, because it has an impact. I mean, do you think there'd be witnesses' testimony, or do you think that the president would be protected from further abuse by Schiff if they weren't hearing from you? Of course not. They're politicians. They listen to what constituents say more often than they care to admit to, because they really don't want to encourage people to call in like I was encouraging you to call in. But as I said, it's not over, so keep on calling in at 202-225-3121. But I keep on missing this thread. I want to get back to it. This is why the left hates the rule of law. However weak the due process was in the Senate, I mean, it was kind of a crazy trial in terms of its rules. That's not the way a regular trial goes. But at least it had the appearance and elements of due process. And so Schiff and company got angry and upset when they were held to standards of law, when they had to talk about the rule of law, when they had to talk about evidence, when they had to talk about facts. Schiff's whole theory of the case is the world according to Adam Schiff, because no testimony shows the president did anything wrong. The testimony shows the president was rightly concerned about Ukraine. The evidence shows that even the State Department under the Obama administration was concerned about Joe Biden and Ukraine. And so because they take the position that they run the House impeachment and no one can say anything about the lack of due process there. But thankfully there were these elements of due process that really shredded Adam Schiff. Now, has he been sufficiently brushed back to stop him from violating the Constitution and the rule of law again? I doubt it. But the reason the president and his lawyers did as well as they did was because they could rely on the rule of law. And that's why the left hates it. Because if it's all politics, we lose. You'll lose all your rights if it's all politics. But if the Constitution's at issue, the rule of law is at issue, and basic due process rights are at issue, and evidence and the rules of evidence are at issue. And as a non-lawyer, I've certainly working at Judicial Watch for, 21 years now, going on 22 years. I've come to appreciate how these rules protect us. Because otherwise, it's just a big fist fight. And if you want civility in politics, follow the rule of law. well, you won't get complete civility, but it's a great way to ensure that people aren't being victimized thanks to the political needs of corrupt politicians. Is it perfect? No. But you can see even an imperfect process in the Senate, however politicized it is, can vindicate the rule of law. So there is unlikely to be witnesses. So thank you, Senator Murkowski. Thank you, Senator Alexander. Thank you, the other senators who are... Oh, the Senate just voted no on witnesses. So thank you, all those senators who voted no on witnesses. So it's done. But, you know, I run hot and cold on witnesses because I would have liked to see a lot of people testify, and I'm sure you agree with me. But Senator McConnell, I'm sure the president was thinking this is an abuse, and they don't deserve the time of day. There's nothing worthy of impeachment. And, you know, when you go into court with deficient claims, you get thrown out. And that's what's going to happen here, practically speaking.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.